can you tell me about the XML?
Yeah, that's.
I was looking at Cruise the other day because I was wanting to change the server we're using at my day job, and yeah, I was quite surprised to see that after you get through the wizard of creating a pipeline, it sort of reverts to XML. What's all that about?
Yeah, so that's been a frequent source of complaint. So there's some advantages to XML config, which is that it allows for simple external configuration of the tool. So you could, for example, send the configuration out via Puppet and manage it centrally in version control, and it becomes much easier to kind of audit it and see exactly what the configuration was at a particular point in time. Obviously, it's extremely unuser friendly. We have put some little things in there to help you with the XML config. So, for example, if you use the wizard in Cruise, it doesn't let you save the config; it's not valid. So there are some bits that make it slightly nicer, but it's still horrible, obviously, and we are committed to getting rid of it. What we're planning to do is put wizards in over the course of the next few releases. So hopefully you'll start to see that with the 2.0 general release. At least some incremental move, and we'll be moving everything over to wizards. I mean, what we decided to do is focus on delivering other functionality before delivering wizards. And I mean, it's what's enabled us. Yeah, but I know that it's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely need some kind of easily parsable config file, and being able to push that out with some other management systems. Brilliant. I mean, I do that on my my own CI server. Is all the config is managed under Subversion using Puppet. No, fair enough. It's good to see that we'll be moving along from that in time. I'd like to talk about the build pipeline if we can. I mean, obviously, you and I have discussed this, over the course of some years. But for anyone who's really just come along and seen the term, can you kind of give your brief overview of that and what it really does for you on a project?
Sure. So obviously, every project has this cycle of building, deploying, testing, and releasing, and all your teams will be involved in that. And really, the problem is, as we've both seen, it's very hard to get visibility into that process and to manage it well. So it's very typical for developers to throw things over the wall, and then for build dudes to have to come and kind of try and do manual deployments, and then that take ages, and then the developers don't get feedback on the deployment process for ages, and then when they get bug reports, they're 2 versions behind the development, and the bugs aren't relevant anymore, and then the operations people are up till 4 a.m. trying to deploy it. I mean, this is very typical, and this is the problem that we're trying to solve with Cruise. Actually, give everybody who's working on a project, from operations to program managers to developers, visibility into the status of every single check-in, which automated and manual tests it's passed, whether it's passed performance tests, other kinds of non-functional tests, and to get control over that process so that you can do click button deploys. You can just press a button and bang, it's in your manual testing environment, bang, it's in your staging environment, and ultimately push button deployments into production. I mean, one of the interesting memes that's been developing over the last few months is kind of continuous deployment, and I think Cruise is really a tool that's absolutely designed with that in mind. The idea that any check-in, that that you can see the moment the tests are passed, and you can just press a button and have that deployed into production straight away.
Okay, great. The last question I was going to ask was about one of the kind of side effects I've seen of being able to have all these different stages of build, which is projects ending up with some kind of horrible automated functional tests that might run for a very long time. There was a major retailer project that was done at ThoughtWorks that had a functional test suite that ended up running for hours, and I think it was nearly approaching days at one point. Do you have any comment on what you should try and do to avoid that? I mean, it's quite easy to generate yourself an enormous volume of functional tests with any kind of tool, really, and trying to make that work with continuous integration then becomes difficult because you can't really have builds typically that are 4 hours long. Any advice really for stopping that from just tools like the build pipeline from perpetuating the anti-pattern as allowing developers to
push
things further down the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. I remember you posted a blog post on this a couple of years ago, and it's an excellent point. Because there's a tension, right? On one hand, you want a check-in suite that runs in under 10 minutes. On the other hand, you want a really comprehensive automated acceptance test to prove that, the latest change really does work and you haven't broken anything. So it is tricky, and as you point out, there's a tendency for developers to pay attention to the check-in suite and to ignore the acceptance test suite, and then you just end up with acceptance tests that are red all the time until you come to release, and then suddenly there's a flurry of activity to try and get them green, and half of them are thrown away, and then you're back to the initial problem that continuous integration is supposed to address, which is the fact that you spend ages integrating your code right at the end. So yeah, I mean, it's a big problem. One of the things that, and actually Cruise, one of our design constraints was to try and make that easier. So one of the things that we make it very simple to do in Cruise is to throw resources at that problem. So taking a long-running automated functional test and making it run across a grid of computers is very simple in Cruise. So Cruise has the concept of stages, which are like stages in your build pipeline, and you can define many, many jobs in those stages, and hence assign a part of your automated functional tests to each of those jobs and run them in parallel on the build grid. So what we do is make it very simple to make those test suites run very, very fast by parallelizing them across the build grid. So that's the number one solution. So, for example, Mingle has this automated acceptance test suite that takes 13 hours to run end to end. We have a grid of 60 computers sitting in Beijing, and the functional tests run on those simultaneously and give you results back in 45 minutes. So that's nice. The kind of thing that is very simple to do within Cruise. It's still the case that developers can do more acceptance tests. In a way, I don't think there's a technological problem to that. To some extent, project managers have to just, give developers a bit of a kick and say, actually, it's not done until the acceptance tests are done, and you can't sign off a story until the acceptance tests are green, which is hard to do in mid-flight. It's easier to do if you enforce it from the beginning. Tools aren't going to fix all your process problems, absolutely, but I think Cruise does make it easier to get fast feedback.
Sure. At the end of the day, it's about discipline, and as an industry, we're not always well known for having it. So that's all the questions I had. Thank you for taking the time out to answer them. And is there anything else you wanted to say before we stop recording?
No, I think I guess the only thing I would say is that 2.0 is in the works. One of the kind of sneak previews I can exclusively give you is that we're redesigning the UI for 2.0. So we didn't give a lot of love to the UI in 1.0, and we're totally redoing that for 2.0. So that's quite exciting, and hopefully people will like that, and it'll make it a lot easier to use. 2.0 is due out in, hopefully there's going to be an early access for people to check out in around the May timeframe. So I'd encourage people to check that out. Obviously, we'll blog about it when it happens. But otherwise, it's been a pleasure talking to you. So thanks very much.
All right. Thanks, Jez.